Good evening, folks. Welcome back to Celtic Fans TV. It is starting 11 prediction time for tomorrow's trip to Pittodrie. But before we look at tomorrow's game, we need to go over today's much anticipated press conference with Brendan Rodgers off the back of the fallout from the transfer window, which closed last night. If you want to watch the video that I put up last night, I'll link it up here and at the end of the video if you've not seen it already. We did just get the two players in Kuhn and Ida. Johnston and Turnbull did eventually go out as well. But as I say, leading into today's press conference, a lot of anticipation, waiting to hear from Brendan Rodgers and hear his thoughts on it, on the players we got in, on the lack of activity inward as well after his complaints throughout the course of the first half of the season, and some speculation that the fan media wasn't invited to the press conference today, which was of course wrong. It works on a rota basis. The guys for 20 Minute Tims were there. I thought they asked great questions, and I think Brendan Rodgers was more frank than I expected him to be. He was honest in some ways. I think he still gave some of the answers you would expect him to give about why the club couldn't get deals over the line, about players not being of the right quality and not wanting to just bring in numbers. But he did make some different statements from what we've heard so far this season, talking about being with the support in terms of wanting the club to be braver and go and get that player in the next bracket, whether that be in terms of transfer fee or in wages, which I think wages is probably the one that holds the club back on most occasions. I think, obviously, people are reading a lot into what he said in terms of, does this mean that his relationship with the board is strained again and he's on the way out the door in the summer regardless of how the rest of this season plays out? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I think it probably is strained. I think it's strained, but I don't think it's broken. I think there's always going to be that battle, and I think it's right that there's that battle between the manager and the people who run the recruitment department and the people who run the club. The manager, since time immemorial, should be demanding the absolute best players the club can afford, and obviously we've not been able to do that. I covered this last night. The recruitment team haven't been able to identify players, and if they have been able to identify them, they haven't been able to get deals over the line. There was one comment for Brendan Rodgers about a couple of players really keen to come to Celtic, but the club wouldn't do it. It wasn't really clear if he meant it was those players in the next bracket, in the higher price bracket, that the club weren't willing to bring in, or if he meant the club didn't think it was right, and maybe he didn't see that it was the right quality to come in. I don't know, but he was very keen to point out that we shouldn't have this division, and that there should be no desire to single somebody out. It's a collective responsibility. He's obviously doing that very carefully, but that's dead easy to deflect from the actual failings here. It's between the recruitment department to identify the players and then the club to get the deals over the line. It would appear they're both failing in that regard. And what we want as supporters is just some accountability. We've had heads of recruitment in the past who have come in and had 2 or 3 transfer windows that hasn't worked, and we move on. I think that's the kind of action I would like to see, because these last 2 transfer windows have been abysmal. And I think we have to take a more modern, progressive approach and try and bring in a head of recruitment who has experience as a head of recruitment, maybe at a club similar in size and stature and revenue to Celtic. I think that's what the club want, and there's a lot of talk from people saying that you would forget that we're top of the league and we've beaten our rivals twice already this season. But it's not really about that. That in some ways is the problem. Being ahead of Rangers is not enough. It's not what pushes the club forward. And I think if the club took a more modern, progressive approach and got the right people with the right skill set in the right positions to try and push us forward and to try and make us get better on a scale bigger than Scotland. We're the biggest club in Scotland. We've got the highest budget by a mile in Scotland. But the fans want to see progression beyond that. They want to see the club getting better against its European counterparts of a similar size. So I'll leave it there in terms of Rodgers' press conference today. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll get into looking at this game tomorrow. The big news obviously this week that Barry Robson was sacked as the manager of Aberdeen. I think Paul Levine is going to take charge tomorrow. You hope that they don't get any sort of bounce from that. Sometimes obviously when a manager's relieved his duties and they've been on a really bad run, a team gets a bounce and everybody's upbeat again and they go and perform better. So hopefully Aberdeen don't get that bounce tomorrow. We've obviously got a terrific record against Aberdeen and at Pittodrie in general. You can see some of those stats running along the bottom of your screen now. I suppose the big question mark for the starting 11, in fact, it's probably a tougher job to try and pick the bench tomorrow than it is to pick the starting 11 for this game, which we'll come to in a minute, but we'll get straight into it. We'll start in goals like we always do. With Joe Hart, I think the back four is going to be Alistair Johnston, Mike Nawrocki, Liam Scales, and I think, unfortunately, maybe after his performance last week, Alexander Bernabe. Some talk again about Scales moving to left back, but I think with Carter Vickers out, there's no chance of that. Bernabe obviously would give you nightmares. He runs about like a headless chicken at times. His positional sense is not what you're looking for from a defender, and it's likely to be tested in these tough games that we've got coming up. He's got to stand up and be counted. He's got to perform. Yes, it's a shambles that we don't have a stronger player available in that position, but in some ways, or in every way, I suppose we can only go with what we've got, and he needs to put in big performances in this next few games before Greg Taylor returns to the team. But as I say, no getting away from the fact that that is the big failure this transfer window. We needed reinforcements at left back, improvements, and we haven't got those, and let's hope it doesn't come back to bite us in the next few weeks. In midfield, picks itself, McGregor, Bernardo, O'Reilly. Looking for a big performance out of those three. Matt O'Reilly, I think, again, across the midfield last week, none of them were really at their highest level. I feel like we've dealt with the away games slightly better than the home games so far this season. Aberdeen have obviously been in poor form. Whether they're going to sit back and try and soak up the pressure tomorrow and hit us in the counter-attack, I don't know. I think Ross County obviously played well against us last weekend, but there's no doubt across the pitch we need much better performances individually and collectively than we got last weekend. I think Brendan Rodgers will make no changes to the front three as well, so that'll be Abada, Palma and Kyogo through the middle. Now we've obviously got the options of Kuhn and Ida off the bench. I suppose one striker is better than none on the bench with Ida. Kyogo's got a good record at Pittodrie as well and against Aberdeen. Again, it's just about getting the chances to him. You can see the stat at the bottom of your screen that Matt O'Reilly has had the most touches in the opposition box this season. I think that's a failing. I think we know that Kyogo's never really been the most prolific in terms of being involved in touches and build up and inside the box, but that is a sign that we're not getting him enough chances. You see a game like last week and he got no chances. He got literally no service, I think, across the whole 90 minutes, and that's been the case far too often this season. We've got to find a way of getting more out of the wide players, getting them to the byline. I want the wide players to be braver. I talked about this earlier in the season. A lot of people have picked up on it. I think Palma in the game against Hibs, he did go on the outside more often. He put some crosses in with his left foot. He looked a lot more dangerous, but he seems to have reverted to type, and he's slowly cutting back inside, and it's easy to read. I'd like Abada to be braver as well, one-on-one with a full-back. I want him to get to the byline and get in those positions where he can find Kyogo with an early low cross. That's how we get the best out of Kyogo, and that is something that absolutely is Brendan Rodgers' responsibility, to get the team playing in a way to get the ball to Kyogo, to get chances to him, and that's the only way we're going to see Kyogo's form improve. And believe me, if Kyogo's form improves and we get more chances to him, the team's form will improve as well. So there you go. Like this video, comment your own thoughts on the team below. We'll see you up at Pittodrie tomorrow, where undoubtedly we will be there backing the team as we always are. Let's hope we can push on now. As I say, the support will be right behind the team every single week, like they always are. The question marks remain about how the club is run, about the recruitment department, but we'll be there in numbers like we always are, backing the men in green and white hoops on the pitch. There you go. See you tomorrow. Cheers.